This is your host, Jane Hales, and welcome to today's episode of .Team Talks, a podcast all about driving transformative growth through innovative and everyday automation solutions. Let's dive in and start to tame your tech today. For today's episode, balancing success, solicitor, radio presenter, and business owner Lekhika Chaudhary's inspiring journey. Get ready for an inspiring conversation about balancing ambition, creativity, and resilience. Let's get started. I have a very interesting lady with me today. Welcome to the Team Talks podcast. I have Lekhika Chaudhary. I think she's in one of those categories where she should be the 30 under 30. Looking at her CV already, it's pretty amazing. And it dawned on me this morning. So we have you down as solicitor, radio presenter, and business owner. Wow. Now, those are all quite different things. And graduated less than 10 years ago. I think that's rather amazing. And I just love the chronology of it all as well, in terms of, first it was the radio presenter. Secondly, it was the business owner. Thirdly, it was the solicitor. Now, that's a really interesting way of approaching life. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Lovely. Let's go through the chronology of your career. A radio presenter. Tell me about your show and what you talk about and what's your role in it.
Yeah, of course. So I have a 2-hour show live every Sunday, and it's live online. So I have listeners from all over the world, and it's a discussion show. So we have songs and other segments, but mainly I have 4 topics that I choose that are going on in the media, mainly the UK, but also in other countries. And I give a summary at the start of the hour. And then people send in messages in relation to the question I posed. So I'll give everybody some statistics, maybe some case law, anything to get them at the base level of information for that topic. And then I say to them, what's your opinion? And they send in messages. I go through them. We debate and discuss.
What's the name of your show and who's the audience, please?
Yeah, it's just my show, but it's live on Wizard Radio. So Wizard like Harry Potter, which is a fun way of remembering it. And the audience, it's a big range, but the majority of the people that listen in are under 10. So they're people my age, but also people in school, in education, just about to start work. So I started it when I was 20. And when I started it, a lot of my listeners were my age or in high school.
And you mentioned case law. That's something that you bring up in it.
Yeah, I was in law school when I started the show. A couple of years after. And I really, really love bringing in the law in conversations, simply because I feel like if you don't study it, it's a very scary thing to discuss. So I bring it in to try and educate people. For example, I've had discussion on things like knife crime and getting stopped and searched by the police. And I try and educate people about the law behind it, because I want everybody to have that knowledge when they're out and about. And so I feel like law links to nearly everything that I discuss. So I'm always trying to sneakily educate people. I'm like, by the way, here's a little fun fact that will win you your pub quiz. The law behind this is this.
Here's a fun fact that will help you. How did you manage to get onto that program? How did it choose you as a presenter?
Yeah, so my year 10 English teacher, she wrote a book called Generation Z, which is an amazing book. I love it. And in that book, what she did was she interviewed 13 to 15-year-olds from different walks of life about a big thing in their lives. And so she had people who were super rich, people who had allowances of 10 grand a month, to people who were involved in selling drugs. It was like a big range. And the point was to show that within that 2-year age gap, there is so much difference, but we're all in the same school, for example. And I was one of the people that she interviewed because I was born in India, and then I moved to the Netherlands, and then I moved here. So I've moved around a lot, and I've studied in around, I think it's 11 schools. And so she interviewed me about how I deal with change in my life and how I dealt with adjusting to the UK being the third country. When she went to do publicity for it, a lot of radio shows said, oh, can you bring one of these kids along? And so I went along with her on her little publicity tour, and I did a lot of interviews. And one of the interviews I did was for Wizard Radio. And a couple of months later, my now producer turned around and said, you seem to like public speaking. Do you want your own show? And I was like, yes. A chance to talk to people. Yeah.
You're a great example of change. That's a lot of schools you've been through. What sort of things have you learned about coping with things just being thrown at you that you hadn't expected, or coping with moving from places to places?
I think I've learned that I hate change, which is a really bad thing in the sense that it happened so much in the first 10 years of my life that I became so resistant to it. And I was talking to my mom about this yesterday, and she said to me, it took you around 15 years to fully accept that you were going to be moving from the UK, because we moved around a lot in a space of 36 months. And then when we moved to the UK, in all honesty, I didn't enjoy it. I was not happy. All of my family was back home. All of my friends were back home. And it was a very different environment. I came to a country, nobody could say my name. People thought I was very different. So I think one thing I've learned is that it's going to happen. You know, I wasn't in control at the age of 9. I didn't have a say in saying, let's not leave. They've just showed me that it happens. So you have to deal with it. You can't just stop dealing with it, because I've seen the negative impacts of me just being like a rock and being like, I'm not going to deal with it. It doesn't benefit anybody and it only hinders me. So even if I don't like it, got to deal with it.
Interesting. And how often do you deal with those kind of situations in a work environment now? How do you deal with that when you're confronted by people resisting change?
A lot. I feel like, especially post-COVID, I feel like people have become, I don't think rigid's the right word, but people have become very set in their ways, which is fine if your ways are the most efficient and the most correct way of doing things. But I feel like people over the last couple of years have become very like, no, my way is the right way of doing it. But especially if you work in law, there are so many changes happening with the legislation constantly and with the ways of working. I always try to encourage people, and I struggle at it as well still, but I was trying to encourage people to be more receptive to change, because I feel like everybody knows something that I may not know. So every conversation is a learning conversation, but not everyone is happy with that thought process.
Interesting. Coming back to your earlier point about education, you like to educate people through the pub quiz tidbits that you say.
Yeah.
Tell me about your business. Tell me the purpose behind that and why you set that up.
So I started tutoring at a national tutoring center during sixth. So I changed schools during sixth form, and the school I went to, I had to take the train to get there. So I thought, let me take a part-time job so I could pay for my train ticket. So I would earn £20 more than what my train ticket was. And that's what I did. And I realized, first of all, I don't like the way that they teach. That's not the way I would teach if I was running something on my own. And also they don't pay me enough. Like, I was always stressed running for my shifts, and I was like, I'm getting paid nothing. So I decided, because my mom used to run a school in India, we should just start our own. And she was like, it's like a homework club, except we're just going to give them a little bit extra information. We used to live in West London. So we found a place, a community center that was renting out a room. And I said, why don't we try it? You know, let's see if it would even work. And we talked to people, and a lot of people started sending their kids. And in the first month, we not only saw improvement with the 4 or 5 kids that we had, but we also broke even in terms of our expenditure. And I thought, well, this is good. And now we've been doing it for 8 years, and we're looking to open another branch, and we've got our own tutors. I really enjoy it. I think that's the biggest thing, is I love the little kids. I think of them as my own kids. They come up to me in Tesco and they're like, Miss, hi, look what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh my God. And I've seen the first kid that we had, he is now off to university. So he's Indian, but he grew up in Italy. So he didn't speak English. He spoke Punjabi and Italian. And my mom was like to me, we cannot speak to him in Punjabi. You need to speak to him in English, so his English goes better. Fine. And he stayed with us all the way up to year 13. And he's now finishing year 13 and about to start university. And I think that's insane.
Wow. Something to be proud of, indeed.
Yeah.
So you started with 4 or 5. How many do you have now, given how many years you've been doing it?
So the number fluctuates because people take time off, people go on holiday. I think we are at 80 now. I think that's what it is in our one center, but I'm in the process of finding a place to open a new center in a slightly different area.
Okay, so that's quite some growth, 580. What have you noticed is the biggest difficulties, stumbling blocks, or changes perhaps between the 5 to 80 journey?
I think there will always be kids that are easier to teach, in the sense that they know to tell you, oh, I don't get it. Can you teach me? And so those are kids who are easier to not manage, but you can help them more. There'll always be kids that just don't want to be there. A lot of parents have forced them to be there. They just don't want to be there. So I think that's one thing that I've learned, because we worked with so many kids throughout the last 8 years, and lots of them have come and gone. And I think the other thing is how you talk to the parent. I personally am not the best at it. I leave that to my mom to do. I can handle the teaching aspect of it and the organizing the courses and all of that aspect of it, but you could talk to the parents. I think it's setting expectations. I feel like they think that miracles might happen, but the kids only come to us for 2 hours a week and there's only so much that we can do. We're limited. So I feel like that's the other thing that we've seen is that there's so many parents to talk to and it's at least 60 to 80 people constantly. And so it's talking to them and managing their expectations.
Okay, interesting. Talking and managing expectations. What about some of the administration things that are different from a small organization to a larger one? How have you dealt with those? What sort of things have happened?
So initially it was just me dealing with it because I was at uni when we started it. And so I could afford to spend a lot of time and I had my own ways of doing it, my own paperwork, everything was online. And then as I started working and I finished uni, I couldn't do that as much. So my parents took over and they deal with it very differently. And I feel like their ways of doing it are not the most efficient. It works for them and it gets done, but it takes a lot longer. And I feel like they know it takes them a lot longer, but that's the whole being set in their ways. So I'm slowly introducing things now. So for example, my dad deals with the payment aspect. I give him the information of what each child is paying. And then I tell him, okay, this child is going to be paying X amount after every 8 lessons, for example. And then he liaises with me when the 8 lessons are done. And then he reaches out to the parents and collects payment. But he has his own notebook to do it. And I'm trying to get them onto Excel or something. I'm like, guys, no, let's not use pen and paper. I'm like, look, if we're on, Google Sheets, you can open it anywhere. But I feel like that's the other thing is that it's gone from me being the one running it all to all 3 of us running it, but everyone does things so differently. So it's trying to be more cohesive.
So have you learned any tips or tricks along the way to help with that cohesiveness? As you said, there's family relationships, but there's education, there's children at stake. Let's face it, this is only part of the things that you do. We've not even got onto your paid employment yet. Or how do you manage to change and keep it streamlined and efficient without falling out?
Yeah. So but I love WhatsApp, right? I know apparently it's not a thing that people use a lot outside of the UK. News to me.
Okay.
But yeah, so I love WhatsApp. I have group chats for everything. I've told my family, you need to be organized outside our main family group chats. And we have chats for everything. So we have a chat for the business. For example, my mom will talk to parents and have a discussion and then forget to tell the rest of us. So for example, on Saturday last week, she said to me, oh, did you give this student a test? And I'm like, why would I give her a test? And she was like, oh, her dad said it. And I was like, didn't tell me. I was like, Mom. So this student came in later and did the test because we do a lot of progress tests, for example. So I'm encouraging her to put it in the WhatsApp chat. I'm like, everything you have, even if you think nobody needs to know it, just put it in the chat and then we can go from there. And then with my dad, I have, as of August, made him an Excel sheet of every student and I put their last payment days and I'm telling him to highlight so that every time he's reached the number of highlights he needs to, instead of having a notebook. So everything is in this one chat. I'm like, everybody needs to make a chat. And I do this for the rest of my life as well. My parents go on holiday, they get a WhatsApp chat. So eventually it will become the cloud and I'll get them onto Google Docs and I'll get them to be comfortable with that. But at the moment it's WhatsApp.
Those are really useful stages to take it from the beginning. Create a simple template, create a simple system. Every time somebody goes away from there, point them back to where they should be. As you say, don't ask me, put it in the chat, then we can all see it. And if, heaven forbid, anybody gets knocked over by a bus tomorrow, there is at least some element of consistency and some communication.
Exactly.
I don't want to be talking about being knocked down by buses, but you know what?
No. It's a valid point. I was very sick last year in May. I was away for a month. I was bedridden for a month. And having all of my information in one place made it a lot easier. So they could look at the paperwork that I'd created and just know everything about the kids that I was monitoring and, just pick out from there and go from there. So it is a good point.
Excellent. And what about your plans for the future? Given you mentioned you were changing location, what do you have in terms of vision for the business?
So at the moment, I'm creating my own content and I'm also in the process of looking for another location to open another branch. But I want to do that alongside having set content. I want to collate that all into one folder for each year group, for each subject, for example, and then just update it and then open up another place. But the ways of learning are the same. So a year 8 student could come to a branch in Southall, but go to a branch somewhere else and still learn the same way and learn the same content rather than it being, completely different. So I'm trying to make that a lot more even and then open up another place and set in place a tutor and a manager and go from there.
Interesting. So you mentioned the word content. In my world, content often means marketing information. I'm hearing you talking about content almost being curriculum material. And I suppose in other people's worlds, that's almost the process. It's okay, first lesson, second lesson, third lesson. It's interesting how we all have different terms for, in effect, giving people an idea of what comes next, isn't it? On the same page of whatever you mean. I hope you don't feel I'm being rude, but I've noticed a few bleeps in the background. I know when we spoke previously, you talked about the number of notifications that you get on your phone in terms of diaries and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
200? Did you say that you had 200 notifications a day to deal with?
Yeah, it's insane, all of my notifications.
So tell me a little bit about how you manage that. How do you stop going mad from all of that and work out what to deal with versus what not to?
A couple of years ago, I think it might have been during COVID, but around that time, 2020, there was a TikTok trend where they were talking about screen time. And this conversation comes up with my friends all the time. And they were, what's your screen time? And I know that iPhones have a built-in feature where you can see your screen time, but back then Android didn't. So you had to download an app. So my Samsung has it now, but I remember downloading this app and it was like, you open your Instagram 183 times. You have this many notifications on WhatsApp. And I was like, hello? I was mortified. Not because I was comparing myself to others, but I used to say, oh my God, Instagram is my least used app. If I'm opening Insta 180 times, what am I doing on other social media platforms? And that wasn't even for work, And so I muted all of my apps. I muted every app besides WhatsApp. And on WhatsApp, I muted everybody besides my family group chat. So any notifications that come in, unless they're alarms I've set, are my family. Everybody else, everything else is muted. So if I open Instagram, it's because I want to open Instagram instead of getting a notification and opening it straight away, which is what I was doing. I would get a notification and I would reply straight away. And I realized that was very bad. For example, in my 9 to 5, I'll have other things that I need to add in. Maybe I need to make a call, book appointments. So I will have an alarm for that. And then I have little notebooks scattered around everywhere with things to do. And I have 3 WhatsApp chats with myself, which are my to-do list. They're pinned to the top. They're called things to do 1, 2, and 3.
Fantastic. I didn't know you could pin particular chats to the top of your WhatsApp. Excellent. Because as you say, some are more important than others, aren't they?
Exactly. So the top one is like family, miscellaneous, non-job related things to do. The middle one is like new jobs I want to apply to, career things in terms of my legal career. And then the last one, I do a lot of writing. I write poetry. So that's where I put it. And then eventually I'll collate it onto a Google document. So
brilliant idea. And I also noticed that you didn't realize how much time you were spending on Instagram until you measured it. Now, that's something that we often forget to do, isn't it? We mostly underestimate or overestimate the importance of something until we've actually measured it.
So on TikTok, if I think it's 45 minutes, it will tell me and it'll kick me out. And then I have to put a password to get back in. But by then I've snapped out of it. I'm over. And same with Instagram. I don't think I've gone on Instagram for more than 20 minutes now in the last year and a half, 2 years since that. So my 20-minute timer, I've not reached it. I think my average is like 18 minutes. Brilliant.
Because I think Pomodoro technique might be an example. Yep. That might be an example of that. And there's lots of those time management techniques out there and you're using them in an everyday capacity. That's fantastic. We briefly spoke about managing emails from different accounts because you've obviously got your radio, your business, your work, personal. How have you managed to keep on top of that? We spoke about a couple of packages. Don't know whether you looked into those there.
Yeah. I've not had a chance to look into them yet, but what I did over the last week since we last talked is I made an insane amount of folders and I set rules. I set rules on my Outlook. So I've got my work Outlook. That's fine. I have folders on that, right? So each case is a folder. And then depending on what stage it's in that subfolder. So I've got ongoing, new, near completion, etc. But with my personal email, because everything else to do with the tuition center, to do with radio, to do with other things come to that email, I made a 2020 folder and then I made folders for everything. And I've made rules so that emails don't even come into my inbox. They go straight to that folder and then I can look at it. And it's made it so much more efficient. And then I unsubscribed from like 400 different things because I've had this email account since year 7. So I did that and it's now already a lot more organized and streamlined. And again, I've pinned a few things to the top. So when I log into Outlook, those are the things that I need to deal with when I have a minute, and for already helping a lot more.
Brilliant. So a week ago, we spoke about you potentially getting an app called Superhuman to organize it. In the meantime, you've gone away, looked at everything, and managed to do so much better than even paying for an app. Well done, you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was like, let me see. And, I can look at the apps, but I thought if there's something I can do that would work, because the problem I have with apps and everything is it never works. It will do 90% of the job that you want, and then 10% you're like, oh, I wish it could do this. But that's because it's built for everyone. It's not built for me personally. It's homemade rule.
That's very wise. So that's your hobby. Tell us more about being a solicitor. What kind of crossover learnings and things do you find that go between your paid employment, should we say
9 to 5?
9 to 5. That's right.
So I have just recently switched roles. I was in private practice, and now I'm working for 3 London councils. So I do commercial property law for them, and it's very different to what I was doing before. Initially, when I was working in private practice, I felt like there was a lot of things that I would learn there that I could take away with me in terms of managing clients, in terms of being more efficient, in terms of admin, in terms of how can I work in a way that gets the work done within the time it needs to be done sort of situation. It's a little bit different at the council. And I feel like that's just because in the council is my client. I'm dealing with lots of people, different departments, of course, but I'm dealing with one entity essentially. But in a private practice firm, you're dealing with 60, 70 people at the same time, which linked a lot more to the tuition center because I was dealing with 60, 70 parents. And now here I'm only dealing with one entity, one set of parents. So I feel like the overlap was always in terms of organizing. I did the Pomodoro technique during university, right? Where I would do 75 minutes of work and then I'd take a 15-minute break. And I tried that. It didn't work for me. I'm more of a sit down for 3 hours and don't break, and then you have a break. Mm-hmm. And I find that in my job as well. And I'm trying to find a way of working a lot more efficiently, because it's great to do 3 hours of solid work, but then I don't want to work for another hour. And that's not always feasible. So I'm trying to find a way that I can work at the weekends with the tuition center, but also in my 9 to 5 that works. That is probably more closer to the whole Pomodoro 75-minute, 15-minute break than the 3 hour slogging it.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I would suggest being kinder on yourself, because if you look at things from an outcome perspective, if you're solidly doing it for 3 hours and you achieve what somebody else would do by having a 15-minute break every hour, if the quality of your work is such that you're able to focus deeply and get stuff done, you're probably doing the work of 2 people. So, but
it's because I grew up in India. In India, they make you study that way. So they make you sit for hours on end. And my sister, born in India, but had grown up here, is more of the 60-minute, 15-minute break. 60-minute, 15-minute break. And in India, they're like, no, you're sitting down and studying for like 3 hours straight. And I'm like, okay. So when I came here and everybody was doing this whole, we're going to have a break. And I'm like, but we've only worked for 45 minutes. Like, that's so weird. I'm just getting into it. Like I'm getting warmed up. I'm like feeling the tingles. I'm like, now I'm getting ready. And they're like, break. So sitting with my sister when she was doing her GCSEs, she was studying, she would sit with me and she would have had 3 breaks. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, I can have a break. And she's like, I've had 3. And I'm like, okay.
Wow. So interesting cultural differences that I wasn't necessarily aware of. So that's a great thing. So maybe when it comes to employing people, maybe we should be mindful of where they were educated, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I think it does have an impact. And in my old firm, actually, you could see that because there were more people in that firm who grew up outside of the UK in comparison to the people in the UK. So a lot of the lawyers in the first firm that I was in were born and raised in Asia. So India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And then there were a lot of the assistants were raised here, and the trainee solicitors, etc. And you could see that there was a lot of frustration. So one of my supervisors, when I qualified, he had another person who was his trainee, and they didn't gel for months because she was, I'm going to take a 10-minute break. It's been an hour since I've been working. And he was, we've been working only for an hour. We're going to do another hour and a half before we take a break. But I was like, you need to come to an agreement of when you think it's inappropriate to take a break.
Interesting, different working styles and intrinsic motivation and how you have it. I was having a conversation with my daughter only today talking about whether you work within your hours or whether you work till you've done the job. And I have the freedom to take a lunch hour or 2 or 3 as much as I want. No, if I'm in it, I keep going. I drive the change.
Yeah.
Things happen as a result of where I choose to focus my effort.
Yeah, but yeah, that's my WhatsApp chats. I'm always writing things down.
So where are you thinking about going next? I mean, you're a solicitor, you've got a business, you're a broadcaster. What else can you fit in? Or equally, what would you take out in order to fit in the next thing? Where are you going?
I think I want to do something so that the business can run without me. It takes up a lot of my time. It will always be something I'm a part of, but I want to be on the pure management side of things. And I want to be able to manage multiple branches for the next. I love doing my radio show. So even if that doesn't change in any aspect, I'm happy to keep doing it because it's something that I really enjoy. In terms of the legal career, I switched from private practice to the council to see if it would work for me. So I was thinking before I grow up, I want to try different roles I can take as a solicitor. So I've done the private practice. I'm doing working in the council. I want to try in-house. So going to work for a company, maybe a pharmaceutical company, a sports company, a media company, to be their in-house lawyer, to then see if law is the future for me, if I want to do it for the next 20 years. And if I do I want to be in private practice? Do I want to work for the government or do I want to work for a company? And then choose my own path. Or do I want to start my own firm? You know, that's not something I could do now because it requires a certain amount of experience. But I thought I would see every different role I could take before making the decision. There'll always be a part of me in the back of my brain that would be like, maybe you would have liked it if you went to work for like the BBC. So I'm sowing my career oats.
Wow. We talk spreadsheets, we've talked issues, we've talked ways of sorting your inbox. Some people come out in hives and get allergic when I mention process because they are creative people or it's not something they've thought about. How would you define that term process? What do you like or dislike about the thing process?
So going on a slight tangent to answer, when I chose my A-levels, I thought, okay, I'm going to go into engineering. And I chose maths and I chose physics. And I hated English in GCSE because there was no right or wrong answer. And I loved math. Loved it. I still to this day love maths. Comes very naturally to me. Ironic because I'm in law, but it comes very naturally to me. And because it was always a right or wrong answer, you know, then you could go about it 15 different ways, but you'll get to the same answer. And that's what I think of when I think of process, is that everybody has their own process. If the end goal is the goal that you need to achieve, the process doesn't matter to me. And it's interesting you say that creative people don't like process. And I understand that, as my name means writer. In Hindi, Lekhika means a writer. One of the things I want to do in life is to publish my writing, to publish my poetry. But I feel like I need process when I write. Sometimes my writing comes from nowhere, but I have a process. Even if it's 3 a.m. and I've woken up because I'm thinking of a song lyric, there is a process. I either have a notepad or I have my phone and I give it a title initially to start off with, and then I write it down. When it's finalized, I'll put it on my first Google Docs. I have 2 different Google Docs for it. I'll refine it and then I'll put it on my third one. So there is a process there. It's just a lot more flexible than if I'm enrolling a child into our tuition center. I love it when there's processes to things. I really like it.
Interesting. How long were you doing that, waking up, writing it down, process before you realized it could be determined as a process?
I've been writing since I was 9. So I must have done it for at least 2 to 3 years. And then I was like, wait, this would be a way of working for me that works.
Interesting. So you're doing it for 2 or 3 years before you step back and went, oh, there's a pattern here. It's happening each time. Because that's a phrase often called decodifying what's happening. So by talking to somebody else, by somebody observing what's happening, they can often see the patterns that you can't see that you're going through. So thank you so much. People want to get in touch with you. How can they find you?
So I have an Instagram. It's Lekhika.Chaudhary. It's my full name. Or I'm also on Twitter. It's just my name with an extra 2 A's. So you can find me there. And then you can listen to me if you want on air and drop a message, or we can chat there.
Okay, lovely. Well, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Team Talks today. We hope you found that aha moment to help you on your journey towards automation and business growth. Don't forget to subscribe in the link below and tune in next time where we'll explore. Till then, remember to tame your tech and keep pushing those boundaries.